Thank you for joining us here today. My name is Megan Williams, and I'm the Director of Support Services at Alzheimer Group. If you're joining us for the first time, Alzheimer Group is an organization that supports people who are living with dementia, as well as their families, professionals, and the greater public. We offer programming for people with dementia, counseling for caregivers, support groups, and education and outreach events like this today. Today's lecture is made possible by the generous support of the Lindsay Memorial Foundation. And it is a free lecture, and we'd like to thank them for giving us the funds to be able to offer this to you. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Dr. Antoine Hakim, Emeritus Professor, University of Ottawa Brain and Mild Research Institute, Ottawa Hospital Research Institute, and the Ottawa Hospital. Dr. Hakim was the founding CEO and scientific director of the Canadian Stroke Network and the University of Ottawa Brain and Mind Research Institute. Dr. Hakim has received many honors during his career. In 2007, he was appointed the Officer of the Order of Canada and received the Willis Award. He was a recipient of the 2017 Canadian, correct me if I'm Garner-Whitman Award, referred to many as the Baby Nobel, for his outstanding research into strokes and their consequences and championing strokes prevention and treatment in Canada and beyond. Dr. Hakim is also the author of the book that is available also in French and in English called Save Your Mind, 7 Rules to Avoid Dementia, which emphasizes actions individuals and societies can take to reduce the risk of dementia. So without further ado, thank you, Dr. Hakim, for being here today. We really appreciate it. The way for everyone, the way that it's going to work today is that there is a Q&A and a chat function at the bottom. Please send us your questions as we have a conversation about 7 rules to avoid dementia. Okay, I'm gonna just share my screen, Dr. Hakim. So good afternoon. Can you see that okay?
I can, yes.
Okay, perfect. So I know that Dr. Hakim, when we spoke several times, you were talking about how to prevent dementia and how it's something that happens when we're much younger. Is that right?
That's right. That's right. First of all, thank you for the lovely introduction. And I'm delighted to speak to your group. Montreal has always got a big place in my heart. It's where I did my neurology training at the Montreal Neurological Institute and spent many years in that hospital on staff. I have really one main message to everyone. And it's a very, I think, the most important message of all, and that is that dementia is not a necessary companion to aging. It doesn't come to everyone who is aging. It comes to those who have neglected to protect themselves during their young years. We have learned the most conservative estimate I've seen of what percentage of dementias could be avoided or prevented is 45%. But I have also seen a lot of statistics that suggest that 80% of the dementias could be prevented by taking steps to protect our brain from the ravages that bring on dementia. The most important thing to remember about our brain is that this organ, which doesn't beat like a heart, doesn't move like a muscle, it just sits there, consumes a massive amount of energy. It is incredibly dependent on its energy supply, which is blood flow. The supply of blood to the brain is absolutely crucial because whether you are walking or talking or even sleeping or dreaming or eating, your brain is working. It is absolutely avid. It's an energy pig. It is absolutely dependent on its blood supply. Anything that brings more blood to the brain will protect you from dementia. Anything that diminishes the blood supply to the brain will bring dementia on. Basically, I've told you everything I know about this field. That is the main message. So let's look at the 7 rules just to refresh our memories about the 7 rules that would, if you follow these rules, you will protect your brain from dementia.
And Dr. Hakim, I just want to remind people, I see that someone has their hand raised. If you have a question, please put it in the Q&A so that we can ask, and it might be relevant, and we can maybe have a conversation of it going from there. So please remember the Q&A or the chat function, okay? Thank you, go ahead.
So my rules are really very simple. I have put down all of the activities that will bring more blood to your brain as things you ought to do, and all of the activities that you need to avoid or situations that you need to avoid because they reduce the blood supply to the brain. So rule number 1, your brain is like any other part of your body. Use it or lose it. And so how do you use your brain? You use your brain by learning things all the time, by being curious about new information, by reading, by singing, by dancing, by playing music, by listening to music. All of these activities will increase the demand that you impose on your brain to learn and to remember. And we know from studies that have been done that when we learn new information, when we force our brain to learn, guess what? It actually expands its memory centers. It gets bigger. And so you will protect your brain from dementia if you keep imposing demands for learning on your brain. And it's very important that there should be variety there. As I say in the book and in my lectures, doing Sudoku all day long or doing crossword puzzles all day long would not give your brain enough variety. The brain wants variety and wants you to be persistent. So that's rule number 1.
And Dr. Hakim, is it ever, I know it's earlier the better, but is it too late at 70 to start, I guess, new activities or?
There is no such thing. The brain only knows whether you are working it or you are not working it. It doesn't really care about your age.
Okay.
Now, having said that, the earlier you start to follow these 7 rules, the more protected your brain is going to be. It is really almost a bit too late to discover these rules when there's already dementia setting in.
Okay.
It's almost a bit too late at that time.
But you know, it's still probably still good.
Absolutely.
To do. So is there, like, a lot of people might say, well, how much is enough? So, you know, if they were doing a puzzle or Sudoku or, you know, learning a new language for an hour a day, is there a number that you can quantify that?
No, because there is no such thing. It basically, there is no limit. The more, the better.
Okay,
the more,
great.
The better. And the
Good.
more demanding the activity, the better. I talk about joining a choir to sing. And the reason is that singing in a choir is a very complex activity when you think about it. Number 1, your eyes are reading the notes and converting them into sounds that you then produce. And immediately your brain is comparing what you just put out of your mouth with what is in front of you. That's a demanding activity by itself already. And then you've got to coordinate all of that with the sounds that are coming from your left and your right and from behind you. And so joining a choir is, so the more demanding the activity, the more healthy it is for your brain's cognitive functions over time.
Okay, so complex type activities that require more different types of thinking. Correct. At the same time. Great.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. So rule number 2, if the brain is injured in any way, you have just lost a part of the organ that will be serving you as you get older. So that's why we talk about the fact that strokes, which damage the brain, are now both preventable and treatable if you learn the symptoms of what it is that can bring on a stroke and avoid those conditions. And if you suddenly feel that the face is drooping or the arm is weak, get yourself to a hospital by calling an ambulance. Don't drive yourself to the hospital. Call an ambulance, because they will know which hospital to take you to treat your stroke. So it's very, very important to learn the risk factors for stroke: high blood pressure, high cholesterol, smoking. All of these things diminish the blood supply to the brain and can bring on a stroke. But even if you didn't follow all of the prevention rules to avoid a stroke and got a stroke, it is treatable in the first few minutes to hours. And so call an ambulance.
Okay. Dr. Hakim, about strokes, I'm not sure, are there any types of diets or foods that will help decrease your risk of having a stroke?
I think we have learned, first of all, the risk factors are well known, and I recommend strongly that each one of us should have a blood pressure cuff at home. I don't make any money when you buy a blood pressure cuff. I just want to be very clear about that. Once a week, you sit down when you are calm. Why calm? Because you don't want to be stressed. That increases your blood pressure. That's not the number we're interested in. We're interested in the number at baseline. So when you are calm, that's why often by the time you have taken the elevator and gotten into your doctor's office and you're a little stressed, it's going to be a little higher than the number we want to know, which is what is your blood pressure when you are completely calm. When you are calm, the higher number should not be higher than 120. And so if it is persistently above 120, you need to bring that information to your doctor's office. So in the same way that we just talked about your blood pressure, we can talk about your cholesterol level. You can talk about whether, if you're a smoker, you know, I have a friend that says every cigarette is another nail in my coffin. So, you know, cigarettes are very toxic to the blood supply to the brain. And so that's really what number 2 is about. And number 3 basically says, in addition to avoiding brain damage, which comes from a stroke, keep the information that I just shared with you about maintaining a log of your blood pressure measured on a weekly basis and showing it to your family physician when you go there. Here's what my blood pressure has been. Keep also all of the other risk factors for blood vessel injury and damage, namely too much blood pressure that is too high, smoking, cholesterol, elevated cholesterol, and all of that is incredibly important as a way of avoiding dementia in the future.
Dr. Hakim, would you, are there any natural supplements that you would recommend to sustain the blood flow to avoid any type of blockage?
Unfortunately not. I mean, okay. If you're, you know, there's so much written about this, so many ads about this, and frankly, none of them are really going to help you to avoid difficulty with memory function if you do not follow these rules and take supplements thinking that somehow is going to protect you. It isn't going to happen.
Okay, I think it's important though to state that, because so many people get caught up reading the newspaper and going online and seeing, okay, well, you know, it's just like if I eat if I eat blueberries, if I drink the red wine, you know, what can we do? So it's
Yes.
important.
Yes.
So thank you.
There are some, you know, I mean, blueberries are good for you. Bacon is not good for you. So, I mean,
Darn.
yeah. You know, and industry is pushing us in the wrong direction. You know, bacon is now in everything. And you made a, you know, we go to Prince Edward Island in the summer, and in this ice cream place that I go to with the kids once in a while, had this huge sign on that said, try our new ice cream. It's ice cream with bacon. And I'm thinking, why would anyone want bacon in their ice cream? So I went to the window and I said, are you kidding me? Bacon in your ice cream? He said, sir, you wouldn't know. You wouldn't have any idea how popular that is. It is so popular. So we have gotten to the point where we enjoy fat, enjoy high sugar. It's what we seek. And that is very toxic.
Okay. Well, I'm glad I don't have bacon for dinner, but I'll try not to on the weekend have it for breakfast.
Yeah. I mean, it's pervasive. It's in everything.
It is.
We can go on for a long time about, you know, what I remember seeing this ad of this long line of people, none of whom was less than 350 pounds, standing in line waiting for the next big thing. And the next big thing was this pie that was full of bacon and chocolate pies. And people were standing in line. So anyway, stop me. I don't want to go on. So that brings us actually to number 4, and that is the Mediterranean diet with its emphasis on vegetables, fish, and nuts, not salted nuts, but nuts without salt that are roasted. That, it turns out, is the best diet to have. And all of the things to avoid, we've already mentioned. We have a diet in North America that is very heavy on meat, very, very heavy on fat, very heavy on French fries, you know, and we can go on. And these things do have an impact on the blood supply to the brain.
So, Dr. Hakim, would you say that obesity is genetic? And what would you do if you're predisposed?
I think a great contributor to obesity is lifestyle. It isn't so much genetic. In fact, I'm not sure that any of us who had obese parents would not be able to fight that by bringing on good eating habits and following some of the advice here. No, there is no one can really say, my excuse for being obese is that my mom and dad were also obese. I don't think that's going to get you out of jail anytime easily. So I think, and it's very, very shocking to us scientists to learn that if your belly is big, your brain is small. There is that connection that when our belly is big, that is not storage material that is not active. It is very active. It produces hormones and other active inflammatory compounds that go to the brain and poison its blood supply. So obesity is toxic because of the impact that it has on the blood supply to the brain.
So if you were obese and you lost excessive weight and fat, can you essentially reverse the damage that was caused to the brain?
Yes, but give it time. It's not going to happen overnight, but yes, you will. If you follow these 7 rules, your brain will forgive you your past.
Okay. Are we looking at like a 5-year timeline or a 10-year, or is it hard to say?
Well, it depends where you're coming from. It depends where you're starting. And the longer you follow these rules, the better you're going to be at the end in terms of your memory function. And I am not for a second suggesting that losing weight is easy. It is not. It is not. But if you know, and if that's your only rule that you're breaking, maybe your brain will forgive you. But because this whole thing comes as a package deal, you can't just follow one of their 7 rules and say, "Oh, I'm fine because I'm doing the right thing in number 3 or 4 or whatever." This comes as a package deal. So number 5, active lifestyle is key. We have learned that when we move our muscles, that there is good hormones that go from the activated muscles to the brain and open up. I have a little signal that says your internet connection is unstable. I don't know what that means,
it's
but
okay.
let's
We can
hope
still
for the
hear
best.
you. Yeah, we can still hear you.
Okay, yeah. So move your muscles. If it's winter time and there is ice outside, I don't want you to go out there and breaking your hip. Go up and down your stairs until you get out of breath. So getting out of breath is your signal that you have been active enough in the last few minutes. I don't want you to pant yourself, excessively, but getting out of breath, getting a little short of breath because you have walked around rapidly or gone up and down the stairs rapidly is your signal that you're doing enough to open that's when you're panting a bit, that's when your brain's blood vessels open up.
So what happens for people though, Dr. Hakim, who have poor mobility? Is there a way that they can still get that, I guess, endurance up?
Absolutely. It's whatever your physical handicap allows you to do it and get out of breath because you're doing enough. Even if you're sitting on a wheelchair, get some weights and do your exercises with your arms if that's the only thing you can do. And so it's very important to get to the point where you're panting a bit because of an exercise you're doing. And if you could do that twice a day, bravo. If once a day is all you have patience for, that's great. If you don't do it at all during the day, that's trouble.
Okay. Well, I know what we're all going to do right after this lecture.
Okay. And I give the example in the webinars of something you see when people we don't go shopping anymore because of COVID, but when we used to go shopping, people drive around the parking lot of the shopping center looking for a spot close to the door, and they'll keep driving and driving to get that spot close to the door. And I'm saying, hey, here is a chance for you to do something useful for your brain. Park far away where there's lots of empty parking spots and jog yourself to the door. And here so we talk about activity snacks. We talk about energy snacks. These are the muscle snacks that you can do every once in a while. Just teach yourself to do them and incorporate them in your life.
And someone, Dr. Hakim, wrote in the Q&A when you were talking about stimulating your mind, they were talking about square dancing. So, that is, they have to listen to the caller and they have to work with a group. So for socialization, but they're actually also moving their bodies, which I think you're kind of, applying a couple of these rules all in one activity, which seems great.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I don't do square dancing. It's not something we do in this country particularly. But when you think about it, it's incredibly complex that you're listening to music, you're trying to keep your rhythm with the music, and you're trying to coordinate it with your partner, and you're moving your butt all the time. And so all of that is very demanding to the brain. And that's what we talk about, is make it demanding for your brain, because that's what's going to bring blood supply to the brain.
Absolutely.
So rule number 6 is about sleeping enough. Yeah, it's very important. As we get older, we often have to wake up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom. And if you're doing that 2 or 3 times during the night, you're interrupting your sleep pattern. And so it's very important to make up, it's very important to sleep enough, whether you do it because you're taking a nap in the afternoon or doing it because you don't get up at 7 o'clock out of bed when you have been up out of bed 3 times to go to the bathroom. So during sleep is the time when your brain washes itself out of all of the detritus that accumulated during the day. And if you don't sleep enough, the brain, it's like, it's like having dirty oil in your car. It didn't get washed out. So sleeping enough is very important. And the last rule is about keeping a positive attitude in everything you do. Depression is very toxic to the brain. And in my book, I give the example of the woman who loses her husband. And it's usually that. It's not the husband who loses his wife, it's the wife who loses her husband. Women have longer expectancy of life than men do. And so often a woman will lose her husband, and guess what? She's now lonely, and all of her friends say, oh, leave Sarah alone, don't bother her, she's sad, when they should in fact be knocking on her door to try to keep her lighthearted as much as possible. So keep a positive attitude, avoid depression, avoid sadness that is chronic, because that we know shuts down the blood vessels to the brain.
Yeah, and I think with COVID times, with the new vaccine that people are getting, hopefully there's hope that we can have more social interactions. Dr. Hakim, you're just going back to your point about sleep. I know there's lots of people who take sleeping aids so that they get, a full night's sleep. Does that, is that kind of cheating your sleep at all by taking a sleeping aid?
No, it isn't. But I mean, it depends what it is you're doing there are many things we can do to improve our sleep. Number one, if you have a cell phone, turn it off before you go to bed. Number two, if you have a TV in your room, in your bedroom, get it out of there, because sitting in your bed watching TV is not a good way to bring on sleep. Number three, get into the habit of doing something before you go to sleep that is boring and is a pattern that says to your brain, oh, I see, he's locking the back door, he's locking the front door, he must be getting ready for bed. So do something, whatever it is, that tells your brain it is getting ready, you are getting ready for bed. Whether it is walking around the dinner table a couple of times, or turning off your lights, or putting on your alarm, something that says to your brain, oh, I see, he's coming there. The final thing I'm going to say is, don't try to avoid getting into bed, turning the light on, and grabbing your book to read, or turning on your TV. That says to your brain, oh, he wants me to be active because she's reading or she's watching TV. Your brain wants to know that you are not demanding activity in your brain. You are asking your brain to start shutting it down.
Okay. So I'm doing it all wrong then, I guess. Is there anything, I don't know if how much about sleep you're familiar with it, but is there anything about, the amount of deep sleep versus the REM sleep? What if someone never gets enough deep sleep, as an example?
It's toxic. I mean, your brain wants to cycle through those cycles, because that is when it cleans itself up completely, is by going through these cycles. So it's very important. And frankly, you and I don't have control over these different cycles, but it's important to have been in bed asleep long enough to allow the brain to cycle through the different stages.
Yeah, these darn Fitbits and sleep detecting devices,
Yeah.
It's just a game, a little test to see how well we're sleeping.
Exactly.
Antidepressants, you're talking about people who are depressed, people might have lost someone close to them. And very often, you know, people do go on a mild antidepressant. If you're taking an antidepressant, does that cancel the negative effects of being depressed and the damage to your brain?
Well, so depression is a complex situation, is a complex mindset. And if you're depressed to the point where you are not functioning or you're, God forbid, thinking of harming yourself, then absolutely antidepressants are very important. What I think you should keep in mind, though, is if you're depressed because of a situation and you take antidepressants because you're feeling so down, then as time goes on and you get away from that situation, it's important to try to get off your antidepressants slowly, carefully. But yes, I have nothing against antidepressants when it is necessary to take them to protect you. But it isn't something you want to be on for the rest of your life.
Okay. I see, just going back to the sleeping aids, I see in the questions, someone wants to know about melatonin.
Yes.
So,
Yeah. So people have used blue light before they sleep, melatonin before they sleep. There is a number of other sleeping aids, as it were. Again, I don't mind any of these things. Drugs worry me. I haven't heard a lot that is bad about melatonin. But again, look, your brain is ready to sleep. It wants to sleep. Give it the opportunity to do so. And you can really get in the habit of not needing any of these aids before you go to bed, because you're going to find that if you get into the pattern, if you take away the light that you turn on when you're in bed because you want to read, or the TV screen that's in front of your bed, all of these things will help you get to sleep. And you don't need as much of these other aids that everybody seems to be pushing on us these days.
absolutely. Is there a question that I had was, is there any link between epilepsy and Alzheimer's? Someone's been on medication for about 30 years now. And there was also, the same person had a brain tumor. I know it's a very specific question, but just in general, is there any link to epilepsy and Alzheimer's or another form of dementia?
No, I mean, epilepsy is an event that will suddenly put the individual through a sequence of events, from uncontrolled shaking to then losing consciousness. And that needs to be stopped. So anti-epileptic medications for someone who's suffering from epilepsy is absolutely essential. I have not come across any articles or any indication that accelerates dementia in any way. It is important to stop epilepsy. It is, I haven't read anything that says anti-epileptic medications to stop epilepsy will accelerate dementia. I have never read that.
Okay. Okay. And I guess the person can look furthermore and speak to their doctor. What about, I guess now I've opened up can of worms, but what about migraines and strokes? Is there any link to that?
Migraines do bring on changes in blood vessel supply to the brain, but it's an occasional event. There is very little, I mean, unless migraines are happening on a weekly basis and they're causing all kinds of consequences to the individual in terms of neurological symptoms, I don't think that migraines should be, you shouldn't avoid treating a migraine because you think in some way that's going to accelerate dementia. That's not true at all.
Okay. Okay, thanks. Another question that we have is, I'll read it. We live in a world where sleep deprivation is actually bragged about. Following our circadian rhythms, that is going to bed when it's dark, wake up in the light, and adjusting to the seasons can be useful to the brain. Do you agree? And then this person also said, I learned that if we go to bed after 10 and we tend to sleep in, and if we go to bed at 10, and we wake up at 5 or 6, is our brain more refreshed? So I guess the person's asking about, you know, the change of the seasons, if it helps with the brain, and also is there a certain amount of time? I remember someone wise told me that you need to, the best sleep you can get is before midnight. Do you have any comments on any of that?
Well, so we're talking about many things here all at the same time. So number one, there is environmental inducement to sleep. There's no question about it. If you're, you know, I think having a dark room, one that doesn't have lights, doesn't have any kind of, you know, curtains on your window so that you can insulate yourself from what is happening outside. And quiet is also conducive to sleep. These are the environments that your brain wants, in addition to having, just as I said, gone through a sequence of steps that says to your brain, aha, I see he or she is getting ready for bed, is dark and quiet. That's very important. If you're somebody who goes to bed at 10 o'clock, it's fine. I think the other thing I want to say is sitting on your butt, watching TV for 3 hours before going to bed is not conducive to sleep. That is keeping a relatively active sensory stimulation that does not prepare you for bed. So turn off the TV an hour before you go to bed. Get into a sequence of events, activities that tells your brain you're getting ready for bed. Make your room very dark and very quiet.
Okay.
And your brain will sleep enough. It will, if you know, we say 7 hours of good sleep is really what the brain needs most of all. And so give your brain those 7 hours of good sleep in whatever way you can.
Okay. And it's true, you know, you can tell when you've had a good night's sleep, but you feel a little bit more refreshed and you're ready to do all of these activities that you're talking about. Right. There is one question here. I'm not sure how familiar you are with it, but it says in Germany, coenzyme Q10 is always given to cardiology patients regularly to help with heart health. And they don't do this in Canada. Do you know anything about this enzyme and why they wouldn't give it in Canada?
I don't know anything about specifically about this enzyme,
Okay.
but there are, you know, I mean, that question I think should go to a cardiologist. I have not read anything about proenzyme Q10 that will facilitate vascular function. Okay. There are many such drugs and supplements that you read about everywhere. And the fact that it is given in Germany tells me that there may be some truth to that particular one, but it's not something that you will see commonly done. I'm much more concerned for cardiac function, much more concerned about your cholesterol level and your blood pressure and whether you're poisoning your blood vessels by smoking.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. Do you have any, these are your rules to follow to keep dementia at bay. For someone who has dementia right now, or the beginning stages of dementia, I would assume that you would recommend to follow these rules to the best of their ability as well. Absolutely.
I think there are, and I talk about this in the book, we haven't talked about it today, but there is such a thing as normal forgetfulness. We're all busy and have crowded schedules and crowded minds. And so if you run into somebody and you know them, you know them, but you don't remember their name, give it a minute, it will come to you. If you go to the fridge to get something and you forget by the time you get to the fridge, give it a minute and it will come to you. That's normal forgetfulness. Where it becomes more significant is when your memory troubles begin to interfere in your day's activities. That's when it becomes significant. And of course, we all know what dementia is about, and that is that, you know, so there are stages when following these rules will still be extremely useful to your brain. Once you're floridly demented, it's probably too late, and your ability to walk and exercise is diminished, your ability to read is diminished, all of that will interfere. So, and the other message that I have that's very important is that preventing dementia is something that starts really in your teens and 20s and 30s. You can't wait till you're forgetful to apply the 7 rules. It's getting to be, because you haven't acquired these habits, and it's very difficult to impose them on you, on yourself, when you're in your 70s and 80s. It's very important to start early.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, what I took away from that also, though, is that, you know, keep on going to the best of you can. What about a person's baseline in terms of recall? So you're talking about people, you know, there's normal aging and you know, memory loss, it'll come back to you. But what if, for example, I'm always terrible with names. I've always been terrible with names. Does that suggest anything different?
No, I don't think so. I think that really what you're talking about is I've always been a person who is actively doing things, and I don't take a moment to stick names in my brain, and I'll have a hard time to retrieve them later on. I don't think that in itself says you're ready to become demented at an early age because you're somebody who didn't remember names. It's really, you have to look at the holistic picture. It's not just one thing. So I think it's very important to remember to start early and to remember to follow these rules. Megan, I see 5 questions. Are you opening them up?
I've been reading them. Yeah, I've been reading them.
Good. All right.
Yeah, and the question that just came in, Dr. Hakim, when you were talking about how dementia can start earlier, you know, in your teens, 20s, and 30s, someone had just asked about the hereditary factor that many people worry about. So if their parents have it, and if, you know, their uncles have it, and so forth.
Right. So first of all, it isn't dementia that starts in your teens and 20s. Unless you have a hereditary variety, it is the toxic environment to your blood vessels that feed your brain that can start early. You don't become demented. If you don't follow these 7 rules, you're going to eventually, your brain will get into trouble eventually, but it doesn't happen in your teens and 20s. The brain will fight back as best it can. But if you do not follow these rules, you have high blood pressure that isn't treated, you're a smoker, you're obese, you're sedentary, all of these things will conspire to rob your brain of its ability to remember as you get older. Why do we say that not 100% of dementias are preventable? And it will never be. The best figure I've seen is 75%, because there is a hereditary variety of dementia. And so but it's a small one. It's a small one. We really don't see it in North America. They have a variety in Europe that is there. Mediterranean dementia is something people talk about, but at the same time, there is the Mediterranean diet that protects you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think people are just Also now more and more people are talking about dementia. They're talking about Alzheimer's disease, and they're aware. Before, 20 years ago, it was more hush hush. And I think that talks like these really help to kind of make us aware of how we can control or try to control, have a healthy lifestyle, watch what we eat to make sure we get enough sleep. What's good for the heart is good for the mind, and, just have a positive attitude, like you said. So I really appreciate all of that.
So I think you've said something that's very important, and that is, we used to think, our parents and grandparents used to think that dementia was a normal stage of aging. And I think the main message that I want to provide is baloney. That's not true. Dementia does not have to accompany old age. And we all know 95, we've all come across 95-year-olds with very sharp minds. If they can do it, you can do it.
Okay, we have just a few last questions. I see, Dr. Hakim. Someone asked if you're familiar with Dr. Daniel Amen, who has written many books about brain health and has done many scans to evaluate the level of brain activity, and it's apparently helped many people. Are there such scans like that available in Canada?
So if I get a brain scan on someone that I've never met before and know nothing about them, the brain scan will allow me to predict. We're talking about MRI scans and CT scans, or even more, there's more sophisticated scans now. We don't need to go into all of them, but they will tell me whether someone is probably demented, possibly demented, or running into trouble, or going to run into trouble in the future. We talked about strokes. They are evident, but there is such a thing as silent strokes, which is small blood vessels that get blocked. If you have 10 of those, you're in trouble. And you don't want to get to the point where small blood vessels are blocking in the brain, because when they block, the person is not aware that that's happening. The person will become aware that the arm is weak or the speech is in trouble if there is a big event in the brain. But these small events are silent, but over time, if there is enough of them, boy, they're sure not silent no more.
So should people be getting scans done on a regular basis? How would you tell if you've had a silent stroke?
I don't think you can, but if you don't follow these 7 rules, it's happening.
Okay. And then someone's just making a comment, and I guess a question about your blood pressure comment. And they say that you mentioned that blood pressure should be less than 120, I guess at the highest number you were talking about.
When you are stressed and quiet and calm, right.
Okay, and they said that they've been told by doctors that as you age, the blood vessels harden and blood pressure gets greater than 120 is pretty normal. What's your opinion about that?
I don't agree with that. And I think that the goal of 120, there's a lot of debate in the medical circles about this. Let me tell you what family physicians are concerned about when I talk about a blood pressure of 120. They don't want you to try so hard to bring it down that you stand up and feel dizzy and fall on the ground and break your hip. So I'm not pushing for that. Try to get, when you are at rest, your blood pressure down to 120 when you're completely at rest and calm. And if that's a difficult thing for you to accomplish, then remember when you stand up from the sitting position to just take a moment to make sure that you're not dizzy, and don't start walking right away. I have been very distressed in some old age homes where a person comes and gets admitted and they're completely normal. Guess what is the first thing they do is they give them a wheelchair and tell them not to walk because they don't want you walking and breaking your hip on their on their on their
On their watch or
on their watch in their place. But how toxic is that? Is to ask you not to walk anymore. So that's these are the things we have to watch out for.
Well, I think these are great rules to follow, Dr. Hakim. I think that, let me just stop my share. I think that a lot of people probably are trying to achieve these, but life gets in the way. And yes, sometimes we treat ourselves with the bacon and want to watch that extra TV show at night. And but now after, hopefully tonight when everyone's going to bed, they're going to remember this talk and actually not bring their TV in their room and things like that. I probably have lots of X's and things that I should not be doing. So I want to thank you, Dr. Hakim. And I think that a lot of people will walk away with these rules or just reminders for some of them. If anyone has any further questions for Dr. Hakim, what I would suggest you do is you can contact AGI. It's info@agiteam.com. And we can connect with Dr. Hakim and we can get some of your questions answered, perhaps post them in the newsletter or attach them to this. Today's lecture will be, you will receive an email with a survey and evaluation to see how we did and give ideas of other talks, as well as a link to the YouTube, I guess the area where this lecture will be if you want to rewatch it. And you know, share some of this information with your friends and family. So Dr. Hakim, I would like to thank you for your time. You've been very generous.
Thank you.
And I wish you a wonderful rest of the day. And everyone else, stay tuned. We have another lecture coming on March 25th, talking about palliative care. Okay, so have a great day, everyone. And all the best, okay? Take care. Thank you.